Welcome back to the Thanks for Rolling podcast. I'm Pat Campanola, as always, alongside Jeff Pallone. And today in the studio, we are joined by Rob Magao. Welcome to the studio.
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. The trip up.
No problem. It was great.
So you've been to this building before once, right? You came to the quintet tournament we had?
Correct. Yes. That was a great tournament, by the way.
Yeah.
Everybody's itching for another one.
It comes up in conversation a lot. I need to carve out some time in life to
very well run,
it.
very organized.
Thank you.
It was great.
Yeah, we kept it simple, and I think that goes a long way. I think a lot of these events get a little too big for their own good sometimes and miss out on the important part, which is good competition, right? It's supposed to be about the competitors.
I agree.
And the team aspect, right? It's pretty cool to see, my teammates are together doing this together, right? It's not go to competitions as a team, but everybody's mostly competing by themselves, right?
I know, you guys showed up with a whole squad of people to watch and support.
Yeah, it was really fun. That was that's actually, looking back, it's probably one of the better moments in competition for our guys as a unit that I can think of.
Yeah, and I think Isaac put together a highlight video of it.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, you've seen that one kicking around.
Yep. Good.
Cool. So before we get too far, why don't we get into a little bit of your jiu-jitsu story?
Sure. So I started martial arts when I was a kid in judo, and then my instructor kind of passed away, and I was kind of back and forth between trying to get back to martial arts, but kind of my family didn't have a whole lot of money, so we didn't have, and it was really not a lot where I lived. Kind of lived in the middle of nowhere. So in my late teen years, or mid to late teen years, I found a guy, started training in Okinawan Goju-Ryu and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. And that was right around probably a few years before the UFC, late 80s, early 90s. And, that was the best I could find at the time. And looking back, it was pretty good. And then I kind of, as the UFC came out, I saw that. And I'm like, I got to find a way to learn this. Like, this is amazing, And there was nowhere around at the time. So we would do the Gracie tapes. We bought the VHS tapes, and we threw them in. We had one of those little 13-inch televisions
with the built-in
with the built-in VCR,
Yep.
And we would throw the tape in there, and we would try to copy what we saw, Horian doing on there. And of course, we were terrible and didn't know we were terrible, but that's kind of how it started. And I did that for quite a few years, and then got a decent job out of college and was able to start kind of going around to seminars and stuff like that. I met a guy by the name of Jimmy Kodges, who still trains with me. He's a black belt at my school, and he was kind of doing the same thing. And he was a Connecticut State Trooper, and I was a local officer. Had just gotten on, and we started kind of training together. And we tried going to a jiu-jitsu school kind of in the town that I was a cop, and we weren't really welcomed very much. So right out of the gate, so we ended up continuing on the path of seminars and kind of self-teaching ourselves for a little while. And then I met Kenny Florian and started training with him, going up to Boston, to Mark Delagrati's place at Somerville, Sigatong, Boston. And that's really where the formal training began. Before that, it was just us throwing stuff on the wall and trying to make it stick. And that's kind of where I started. And I trained with Kenny for a while, all the way to purple belt. And then he got pretty swamped with the UFC and traveling around. So at that point, I hadn't been married and kids and everything else, and it was just going to Boston all the time was getting tough. And I'd already had my club open by then. So that's when I met a guy by the name of Keith Owen, and he actually just passed away a few months ago, a great friend of mine. And started a friendship with him, and he was a Pedro Sauer guy, and he's like, hey, you don't want me, you want my coach, Pedro Sauer. So he introduced me to Pedro Sauer, and I've been with him now well over a decade, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Awesome. Just recently got your 3rd degree, right?
Correct.
Congrats.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah. So that's kind of how it started.
Okay. So what year was it you opened your school initially?
My school opened as a club, not really a business, but more of a bunch of us in law enforcement kind of got together and just started training together because we knew that what we had was terrible. And the academy was like, you might as well have nothing.
Yeah.
And we just, one guy was a wrestler, somebody else had some judo, somebody else had, some boxing, and we just all got together a few times a week. That was like 1999. So we called it Bushido. It was kind of our club. And the moniker still sticks in our school, even though we're Manchester BJJ or Hebron BJJ. The moniker is still Bushido.
Right.
So that's kind of how it started back then. And we flew under the flag of just kind kind of Ronins for a little while, you know, until we had more organization.
That's awesome. You definitely stood the test of time.
Yeah.
Opening your own club in 99. I mean, now it's easy to do.
And actually, I never ever anticipated or set out to open a martial arts school. It was never even on my radar. It was not a goal of mine. It was not like, hey, I want to have a martial arts school. We just started this club that started, and people just kept coming. And then at some point, it's like, well, what do we do with this? Do we put it in a building and do something? Because we borrowed, you know, other martial arts schools would let us use their facilities on certain days when they weren't using them. And that's how we kind of got started.
Yeah, right. And then eventually you need your own space. You need money to pay for the space.
Oh yeah, then it becomes obviously a business.
Yeah.
How did it transition into primarily jiu-jitsu? I know you do other things at your schools, but how did that?
Yeah, so our primary art is Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, we have a striking program a couple days a week, but 99.9% of our students are jiu-jitsu based. And I don't know, for me, I trained in a lot of different martial arts over my life, and I trained primarily for my job. And I just felt that of all the things I'd learned, there may be other arts that have a better answer to a specific question, but I just felt like jiu-jitsu or the grappling arts in general had the most answers to the most questions that I faced in my position as a police officer. So I kind of felt it was my duty to correct, you know, any holes in my training from the academy, and that's kind of how it started. And I attracted other people like me, I guess, that wanted the same thing, and we just focused on that. So, and then that's what everybody seems to want. So we stuck with that.
Yeah, a little bit more popular now, I guess, huh?
Well, back then it was we used to I always joke about it with other people. We literally would have to kidnap people to come and train with us. You know, like, no, just, you know, come down, just try it. You know, just come in for a little while. Oh no, I didn't want to do it. Now, you know, it's a hot paved highway and everybody's coming and it's great. But in the beginning, it was tough to convince people.
Yeah, I bet. It's got to be interesting from your perspective, being involved so early on, the multiple evolutions that jiu-jitsu has gone through, right? Looking, you know, would you say late 80s you had started in Japanese jiu-jitsu, and then to now, I mean, there's been multiple, probably big evolutions.
You could almost argue it doesn't even, some people would think it's not even the same thing. You know,
right.
I remember when we first started doing, you know, what we knew as, you know, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was, we'd come to class and we'd have gis and we'd have mouthpieces and we would strike and clinch and take people down, and you know, we would still strike on the ground even with the gis on and choke each other with them, and it was more of an MMA but with a gi on, and then our no gi was when the gi just got soaked and we just threw it in the corner and just kept training. You know,
right.
That's kind of how it was. And then over the years, as competition became more prevalent, people more focused on the rule sets within that arena. You know, less and less, well, we don't need to really strike as much anymore because you can't do that anyways. So more and more people seem to be focused more on just the pure grappling part of it, which I came from a striking background as well. So I didn't necessarily, I don't want to say didn't need it, but it was like, well, you know, I need to focus on the grappling anyways. So I kind of focused on the grappling. And we've come full circle with that. We're back to where we mix it all together. I make all my students, you know, learn all aspects of the art, not just one aspect. I make them learn the history and the philosophy and the you know, self-defense aspect, the gi, the no gi. We do 50-50 of both. So you know, we kind of holistically show the art.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate the value of definitely working in strikes. I feel like that's something we talk about a lot on the podcast, and I keep saying I need to work it in more, and I don't do a good job at it, but that's definitely something that needs to be worked in more.
Changes everything.
Yeah.
I just saw one of the combat jiu-jitsu matches, someone recently got knocked out.
Yeah, like clean knockout. Yeah.
Yeah, clean knockout.
Yeah, and they were small guys too. That was a 155 event. So it's not like it was a big heavy-handed guy that just got a clean shot there. They're small guys.
We joke about that a little bit sometimes, right? Like, we have a UMass police officer, and I was rolling with him the other day, and I was like, I'm shivving you in the neck, dude. Like, you got to protect yourself, right? Like, I just took your pepper spray, you know. But we never actually, like, we don't really train in that regard, right? Like, we don't actually do it consciously. But I would like to. I would throw hands a little bit again. It's been a long time. And
then there's even levels beyond that. Like, we have simunition for our police students. we have simunition weapons that cycle and operate just like a real firearm. We have the holsters, they have their vests, they have everything. You can rip the gun off them and shoot them in the face, and we have the helmets for it and stuff. And so that's a whole nother realm. We have the shock knives and AccuStrikes and all that stuff. So it's when you have that weapons-based environment and you have that into it, and people can rip stuff off of you and stab you with it and shoot you with it, and you realize pretty quickly, wow, jiu-jitsu is not the only answer. Like there's other things we have to worry about here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah, that's a good segue into something I really wanted to talk with you today is your officer survival stuff. I keep an eye on it through social media, and I love watching what you guys are doing. And I'm friends with some of the other guys that get involved in it with you. I'm assuming that's another thing that became a business, like the Jiu-Jitsu Academy, right? That didn't start as a business, but eventually evolved into being such.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much. I had to be kind of roped into, I don't want to say roped in, but for probably about 7 or 8 years, there's 2 individuals, one in particular that would constantly harass me to, hey, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. Jimmy Campbell. So Jimmy Campbell, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't have done it because him and another guy, Dave Roy, who was a judo, I want to say Olympian back in the day. He's a Manchester officer and or sergeant. And the 2 of them really hounded me about it because for many years I would have sidebar training for cops. They would come and train jiu-jitsu, and I would probably twice a year have like a 3 or 4 hour seminar for them where it was just for law enforcement, and we would do things kind of specific to law enforcement. But then at the end of the class, we'd be like, hey, listen, if you really want to make a difference, you got to train all the time. It's got to be a consistent thing. It's got to be a habit. It's got to be a lifestyle. It's got to be something you need to train yourself like a professional athlete. Like that's what a tactical athlete. You have to take it seriously, and you're not magically going to learn in the moment. And I always use the example, if you go to the beach and you saw someone drowning and you saw the lifeguard, you pointed to them and said, hey, they're drowning. And if they looked at you and said, well, I don't know how to swim, you'd be, who hired you? You know what I mean? Like, why are you here? And that's what most, officers I've come into contact with that have come to my training, most have no idea how to control someone. And it's like a huge part of the job in some areas, right? Depending on your position. So through those 3 hour blocks I would do a couple times a year, and one of them we did as a toy drive. So it was always free. I didn't charge anybody. I say, come down. And if it was the one near Christmas time or holidays, they had to bring a new unwrapped toy. We donated it to what's called the Blue Angels Foundation, run by this guy, Bernie Helms. And they would have a huge Christmas Day party for all the kids in the Manchester area, and all that would go to them. And that's when people started to say, well, hey, can we turn this 3 hour thing into something more extensive? And my answer was always, yeah, just come to class. Right? Like, we're here, just come to class. Now, granted, we're going to work on things that may not always be 100% transferable to your job, but you can put it through the cop filter and figure out what's going to work for you. And, side control is side control. A single leg's a single leg. Just the arena that you're going to do it in may change certain things about it, but at the end of the day, it's like a language, and you just need to learn it. And you'll learn how to converse with it depending on where you are. But then it kind of evolved. I started to see, well, we can do more with this. I came from I was a tactical officer for 18 years on a SWAT team, and I worked on plain clothes for 12 years and narcotics and stuff. So I had a lot of other experience beyond just the martial arts side of things. So I said, what could we do to change this? So I went through and I said, a lot of police classes are 5 days in a row. So they'll say, they'll put out something at your agency and they'll say, hey, we have this class, you want to go to it, and a bunch of people will put in for it. And I hate to sound all down in the dumps about this, but the typical way that happens is the sergeant or the training lieutenant or whoever's in charge of whatever agency picks the favorite child to go, and they send them, whether they have a background in it or not, and they send them to this class. The class is 40 hours, 8 hours a day for 5 days straight, and it's usually taught by someone with a certification, but they're not qualified, if that makes sense. And they have a paper certificate, and they're teaching a bunch of nonsense that isn't going to work. That's all static and scripted, and fights aren't static; they're not scripted. They're pandemonium. It's craziness. So they go to this class and they get kind of preached to that this is the way, and they never really do it against a resisting person. And then they go out into the street and try to apply it, and it fails miserably. And they resort to whatever they have in the moment under stress. And that could be the flashlight over the head, or the, a taser 17 times, or whatever it is they have, because they're scared and they don't know what else to do, and that's all they have. So we said, yeah, you know what? Instead of doing it 5 days in a row, let's do it 1 day a week for 8 weeks. So now they have time to digest what they're learning. Their bodies can heal. Their mind can catch up to what they learned that day. I do 6 hours instead of 8 because once you send cops to lunch, they're done. Like, that's it. Like, they come back after eating the chicken parm and forget it. Like, they're done for the day. And
understandable. I can understand.
And by day 3, they're going to be eating Advil out of the bottle, and that's when injuries happen, and then workers' comp and all this kind of thing. And once an officer gets hurt and they're out of work, you're basically hurting a $250,000 man or a woman, because now they have to backfill them with overtime and work. It's just a mess. So we also felt that you do the 5 days and you go home, it's like, oh, I did it. I'm done. Right. I got the T-shirt.
That's a little bit better than doing the one class, but kind of the same idea.
But if we do it 1 day a week for 8 weeks, it develops a pattern of training. We're like, hey, I'm going in every week for 8 weeks. And they look at it as almost, hey, I've been training for 2 months. Well, not really, but yes. And I let them train with me for free that entire time, and even beyond that to blue belt. So
that's awesome.
Once the class is over, they can keep coming, and I don't charge them anything.
Nice.
So in that class, they learn striking, clinching, takedowns, both individual officer takedowns and team tactics takedowns, because you have to work with another person. We do handcuffing, we do use of force, we do case law. We have attorneys come in that do real police litigation attorneys that try cases, that put them on the stand and have them, cross-examine them and stuff under pressure, usually about the scenario they did, because we have a whole scenario day with simunitions and rooms and actors and role players, everything. It's buses. We bring in all city buses, reticulating buses. We bring in everything.
Sounds awesome.
And
that sounds great.
And we go pretty overboard with it. We have trauma doctors come in and do a whole TECC medical program with tourniquets and quick clot and buddy carries and all that kind of stuff. We bring in people that talk about the autistic population and how to deal with them in a use of force situation and how to identify that, so that the person's not going to just jump up and say, hey, did this. You have to be able to see the warning signs of, and understand that the person you're dealing with may need to be dealt with differently than a regular person that maybe not have these issues, and you want them to recognize that. Otherwise, the officer just thinks they're messing with them. You know what I mean? So we have Ryan Rodiger. He's a Southbridge police officer. His daughter's highly autistic, and he comes in and does. He's a purple belt as well, so he understands jiu-jitsu, and he comes in and does a whole thing about it. One of the things that he taught us in the class was, like, if you ever have somebody that's missing, that's on the spectrum, look for water. Look for water, and they're probably near that. And now, two times already since that, I've had that call. And I've gone right to like a river or pool or whatever and found them.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I would have never known that
Right.
had he not taught the class, So and we teach them. We start off on the mats, but we also take them outside. We do vehicle extractions. We do a bunch of stuff, and we bring in on the 6th week. We bring in a whole bunch of jiu-jitsu based people from around New England. You're always welcome to come down, and we put them through some pretty hard pressure testing for about 12 or 5-minute rounds with people that really know. And they get to feel like, wow, this person's controlling me, but they're not hurting me. And they're smaller than me in most cases, and I can't get away from them. I can't do anything. And it really proves to them that, hey, this works.
Right.
This really works. So that's how the program kind of works. And then most agencies pay for their own officers to go. Occasionally, every class I have 3 or 4 that the department doesn't have any money, or the whole defund the police movement, or department won't send the person for whatever reason, and they really want to go, and they'll want to pay for themselves. I'm like, listen, I don't want you to have to pay for it for yourself if it's something for work. Like, we don't. I think Henner or one of those guys said, we don't. Firefighters in their off-duty time don't go pay somewhere to learn to fight fires. Like, they're paid to learn to do it. Right. So it's kind of a job function. So I figure, at least for the class, we try to support them. So I have a bunch of businesses and other martial arts schools that will become supporters of the program, and they'll donate money to support somebody to go through the class. And martial arts schools can become like affiliates, so to speak. I don't charge an affiliation fee. I just tell them to raise money at some point throughout the year to put one person through. And then we have a whole online curriculum. It's all professionally filmed. It's on our website. It's password protected. And any officer or affiliate that goes through the program, they have 24-hour access 7 days a week to that curriculum, so they can go right to it and see us teaching them moves. And that's kind of how we did it.
That's awesome.
Sounds fantastic. Yeah.
Is there anyone else out there doing it like this?
There's a lot of good trainers in the country right now. There's also some really terrible ones, but to my knowledge, there's no one doing this extensive.
It just seems so much more comprehensive than anything else you see out there.
A friend of mine, Chad Lyman's pretty well known in the police training world. He's a Vegas cop, and he's mentioned multiple times on his own social media. He'll tag my thing, my program, and say it's the most comprehensive law enforcement use of force class in existence. So that's a pretty high compliment from someone like him. There's some really good trainers out there. Craig Douglas is phenomenal. He's been to my place actually just recently. Eli Knight and Aaron Giannetti, they're not cops, but they're very, very good at teaching this kind of thing. They do a really good thing with edge weapons, knife control concepts. They've been down. It's really good. There's a younger guy. I haven't met him yet, but I like a lot of the stuff I see online from him. Ruben Alvarez. He was a pretty high-level jiu-jitsu guy.
Yeah, he's a cop in Florida.
Cop now in Florida, and I haven't met him, but I like what he posts and the things he puts up, and he has a company, I think it's Paradox or something like that, and we need that fresh blood in our profession. We need people like that coming in and saying, "Hey, you guys are messed up. Like, let me show you." You know what I mean?
Catch it right from the start.
Yeah. So, and there's two sides to that. It's not just like someone coming in with that skill base also has to learn this job. Like, this job is a lot, and there's a lot of things that you could look at from the outside and say, well, why didn't they just do this? And if you don't know like the case law and the Supreme Court decisions and the policies that we have to follow and stuff like that, you would be kind of confused as to why aren't they doing this? Well, we can't do that. It's like removed from it'd be like going to a tournament and heel hooking somebody in a division where they don't allow it. You're disqualified, right? Only we're not disqualified, we're arrested. So there's a difference and fired. So there's a lot to it. A lot of martial arts instructors want to train officers, but they don't realize that the liability behind that. The liability behind that is huge, because when you start having specific law enforcement classes teaching just a group of cops, and then you teach them things, and then they go off and use those things, you're in the chain now. So if they get brought to the carpet over something, and
Rob told me to.
And they're going to say, well, where'd you learn this? Well, I learned it at this class. Well, who's the instructor? I don't know, this guy, whoever, Bill. And they're going to bring that person in. They're going to put them on the stand. Who are you? Where did you learn? Are you certified through the academy? Is the material is it post-certified? Do you know what Graham versus Connor is, Tennessee versus Garner? Do you know these case laws? And they're going to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And that's where you can get in a lot of trouble, just being someone that wants to help, and you kind of caught yourself up in a lawsuit. So,
what's your take on some of these like online, and I'm going to forget the guy's name, like the guy in Detroit, right, who does like the security.
Dust.
Oh, Dust.
Yeah. What's your take on all that? I mean, it seems to be like more commonplace now that I see it, maybe probably because of like the Instagram and TikTok world and all that stuff, but like, does it aggravate you when you see stuff like that? Does it make you nervous? Like, what's your reaction to that?
I mean, it's kind of like in the martial arts world when you see those people do the knockouts.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Like that, does it bother you as a martial arts instructor? I guess, I don't know. To me, the people going to them are probably got some problems to begin with if they're believing in that. So, I don't know. Some of them are pretty funny, actually. I think of it more of as a joke. Hopefully, there's not a whole lot of people really following him with thinking that he's doing the right thing, but if he is doing it that way, I mean, that's a pretty shitty thing to do, because I've never seen any of the tactics he's shown to be legitimate. Dangerous, get somebody hurt if they really believe in it.
Right.
And it's just, it's weird, because I've talked to a few people that kind of connected to him in a way, and they said that he was kind of a legitimate in the military and had some background and stuff like that. But I mean, what he did, I don't know. But anything I've ever seen him do in a video, I kind of cringe at.
Yeah. That's what I expect you to say.
Yeah, I cringe at,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people, quite honestly, there's a lot of people out there that do a lot of work with the law enforcement and military special operations communities that I know that you'll never see them on Instagram. You'll never see them on TikTok or YouTube, and they're kind of silent and off to the side, and they're very good. They're very, very good. One person that does a lot of work with those kind of groups is actually from Connecticut, on the western part of Connecticut. I probably won't say his name, but he's a well-known jiu-jitsu guy, and he's done a lot of work with those kind of groups, but he keeps to himself with it, and kind of a quiet professional. And most of those agencies, that's who they gravitate towards. Right. They don't gravitate towards the person that's got all these videos on YouTube.
Well, it makes you wonder, right? When I see someone posting 1 million videos on whatever platform, it's like you're only doing that in that, like, to get attention, I would think, right? Like,
yeah,
because it's not like he's trying to sell legitimate business. Like I don't take it as like a legitimate business marketing. It just fits in the same vein to me as like posting a video of yourself dancing, right? It's like you want that little dopamine hit of everybody liking your stuff. So it's funny to me
because like I've taught a lot of the groups, with letters behind their names, and we sign non-disclosures. Like you can't talk about it, you can't tell anybody about it, you can't, and that's kind of the way it goes. And a lot of these people that people watch on YouTube or whatever, they're frauds.
Yeah,
they're not real.
Yeah.
Some of it is just, it's so obviously bad that it looks like it's a spoof, but I don't think it is a spoof.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell.
I think they actually
believe
believe themselves.
I thought it was a spoof when I
did
first
too.
saw it because like the uniform, the whole thing, I was like,
The headset.
Yeah, what is this? Like, it doesn't look like anything that I ever would like process as like someone in a tactical situation. Although that's the way he's dressed, right? It was very strange to me to see the first time.
One of my friends, Ben Sonstrom, he's a Michigan State trooper, and he's in that area out by Detroit. He's actually gone by his place, and Ben's been on my show. He owns a company, tactical medical company. And he said that the building's pretty nice. Like he's got a big Hummer there. And he's got it looks pretty nice. Like he's got money from somewhere. Someone's funding him. So
Interesting.
Yeah. Can you you talked a little bit about your law enforcement background. Can you give us a little rundown of your journey there?
I started off. I worked for the West Hartford Police Department in Connecticut. I did 20 years there full time, and before that, I worked for the DEA as investigative aide through college, which was basically like debriefing of informants, processing of evidence, office work, criminal history inquiries. I'd help with surveillances sometimes on low priority targets, stuff like that. As a college student, I started off as an intern, and then then they hired me, and then I did that for a couple of years while I was in grad school. And I was all set to go to Quantico, and then the hiring freeze hit, and it was kind of in limbo. So I ended up becoming a local police officer, and I was in West Hartford. And I ended up, after 9/11, they lifted the freeze, and I could have gone to the DEA. I went down through some of the training, but I ended up just staying with West Hartford, because by that time, we had built a house and had our first child, and she had her dream job, and now who am I to uproot her now and take her across the country?
Safe plan.
So we kind of stayed there, and I started off in patrol. I loved it. I did 9 years of patrol, and I got on our SWAT team in 1999. I hired 97, SWAT team in 99. I was in our street crime unit for a while, and then traffic division. I was a field training officer. I was a firearms instructor, use of force instructor, all that kind of thing, and became a detective 2006. And did kind of major crime stuff the remainder of my career. Did internal affairs stuff, some like plain clothes, undercover type stuff, but not like buying drugs and stuff, but more like surveilling and following and watching people. Did some executive protection work, both as on the SWAT team and outside of that, privately for some companies and stuff. So that's basically what my law enforcement career was. And I retired from there in 2018, and still work part-time as a police officer, just in a small farm town near where I live. I go out a couple days a month and patrol and help out the state police in that area. They're short-staffed, so they have local officers that will help in some of the towns that need a little bit extra patrol coverage. And we're just kind of like backup cars and help them out. And we can take calls that maybe we can resolve in our shift, because we're not there every day to follow up. So if it's some really long thing, the troopers will come in and do it. And I still do that, and I do the training for them, for the all the local officers in that region. So firearms and handcuffing and all that kind of stuff. That's it.
Pretty varied. Pretty impressive to hear that list. Is that atypical, like to have that many different roles? I don't mean that critically. I think it's pretty impressive that you're able to do all that.
I think it depends on the agency you go to. I mean, police departments are like martial arts schools. You can go to one that's got 5 students. You can go to one with 500 students, and the opportunities in each school are going to be drastically different. So in the police world, there's agencies that literally have, you go up into like New Hampshire and Maine, there's like the chief of police, and that's it.
Yeah.
There's nobody else.
Yeah.
Or there's small departments with like 6 or 7 people. And even in Connecticut, you can have small departments with 10, 12 people. And then you can have, places the size of Hartford, where there's, supposed to be 500, but they're not even close to that right now. So my agency was about 130, which is a pretty good size agency, and they always had a really, really good budget. They put a lot of money into their police department. They were considered, one of the better places in the country to work for a long time for law enforcement. And they put a lot of money into training. Our chief at the time was an ex-wrestler, James Strelacci. So he was really big into, that's how I kind of was brought in to help with teaching the officers, because once you're on the job and you go out and you start doing calls and you start reacting to things, some of the supervisors will see, hey, this person obviously knows a little bit more maybe than the rest of us do. And they asked me to start showing them. And the chief's was a wrestler, so he totally got it. And he was kind of let me go with it. But yeah, I think because I had opportunities, because it's a bigger agency, and did a good job in each division, when openings would come up in other spots, you put in for them, and some things you had to test for, and other things were just more of an assignment.
Yeah, interesting. That's pretty cool to hear all that.
Yeah. Plus, we were really lucky too, because we're sandwiched between New Britain and Hartford, and there's no river between us like East Hartford, so the crime falls back and forth pretty quickly. So a lot of we got to work with them all the time. So that's how I met Jimmy Campbell. I didn't meet him in jiu-jitsu. I met him in
really?
I met him through police work, working cases, and that's how I met him. So
nice.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you've started competing in jiu-jitsu again recently.
That's the exact same question I was going to ask. So
I want to get there in a minute. But earlier on, did you compete at the lower ranks when you were first getting into it?
I did. I competed, white, blue, purple, brown. And then I was a brown belt. I remember the last tournament I did. I was a brown belt. It was at a casino up in Rhode Island somewhere. And I had gotten there early in the day, and of course, coached all my students and everything. And I was, getting ready to, they kept saying, 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes. And it just kept dragging. And by the time I got to go, it was 8:30 at night. And my whole division left except me and one other guy. And
classic.
Yeah.
And the ref was, looking at his phone, and they're ripping the mats up all around us. And I remember he actually said to me, and I said it to him at the same time, as we're grappling, this is stupid. I'm not doing this again.
Yeah.
And I kind of got disenchanted with it for a while. And I was so busy at work. I was working 70 hours, 80 hours a week. And, between SWAT and my kids and, businesses and everything else, I just got to a point. I was getting hurt training for competitions, and we didn't have late duty. So if I got hurt, I was on sick time, and you're losing a lot there. And I was like, you know what, I'm taking a break from this for a while. But I did compete quite a bit actually, in the lower tournaments. I didn't do anything. I didn't do IBJJF or any of those types of things. That's just your Nagas and your Grappler's Quests and your even smaller than that, just Freestyle Grappling Open in Maine. I used to do that one a lot.
So was it out of a desire to, I guess, be good at sport jiu-jitsu, or was it just the opportunities to test what you were working on?
Back then?
Yeah.
Back then it was more I wanted to go see how I did against other people from other schools. Because you got to remember, back in the early days, it was pretty frowned upon to go to visit another school. Nowadays, there's open mats and people go all the time. But it was pretty common for someone to show up at the school and say, hey, I can't take any pictures. You know what I mean? No one can know I'm here kind of thing, And that was a real thing. So you really only got the chance to go against other people on a consistent basis if you competed. So that was one reason I did it. And I think that even from a self-defense perspective, competition is great, because you get to go against, like I said, someone you don't normally train against. You have the pressure of people watching you around you. You have the nerves kind of hit you sometimes, sometimes worse than others. And you got that little adrenaline flow, and that's very similar to a real situation. So I think the more you can experience that, the more you can control it. It'll never go away entirely, but the more you experience it, I think the more you have control over it. So that's one of the reasons I did it. And I also wanted to, show my students hey, I'm not afraid to go out there, and if I lose, I lose. I don't care. So then I kind of stopped for a while, and then I had a string of injuries, and I got hurt pretty good, and I ended up with 2 blood clots in my leg. I had to have surgery. One of them was a DVT, which could have erupted and caused a stroke and all that kind of thing. So that kind of took me off, and I was on blood thinners for a year. So if you get hit or struck or anything like that, you start to, especially internally, it's a problem. And then I was all set to start going back to competition right before COVID. I was registered for Orlando Open. I was all ready to go, and then I got COVID, and I got it pretty bad because I have asthma. So I was one of the first people to get it, and that wrecked me for about 4 or 5 weeks. I was a disaster. I really should have gone to the hospital in hindsight, and then, you know, the whole COVID thing and everything was kind of shut down, and that postponed it a little bit. Then last year I was considering going back, and then I got hurt again. You know, I hurt my hip, and which is better now. And then finally this year I'm like, this is it. I got it. I'm not getting any younger. So I did the Pan Ams. Was my first tournament in 10 years. I hadn't been on a tournament mat in 10 years, and I did the Pan Ams. So I tried to do local ones. I went to bunch of different ones, but they had nobody in my division or any division near me. So it was just like, oh, you can get a medal. I don't want a medal. I want to go against somebody, you know? Yeah. So I said, well, I'll just start doing the IBJJF ones because at least I know there'll be people there, right? And there'll be people I don't know probably and or haven't gone against. So that's what I started doing that. And then I did the reality fighting last week, Mohegan Sun. That was great, actually. I can't say enough good things about that. That was an awesome experience. It was, I haven't never been that nervous in my life. And it's funny. I mean, I've gone on SWAT hits and everything else, you know, and shot at and everything. For whatever reason, that backstage, I was just panicking for about an hour.
Is it just that whole buildup with the waiting and the walkout? And
I think so, yeah. But my coach training partner, I should say, but he'll be mad if I say coach, but he is my wrestling coach, I guess. He's a black belt with me, Jerry Navarro. He was cornering me, and he's like, "You're not nervous. You're excited." Just keep telling yourself that, right? Yeah. So
it's a very fine line, right?
Yeah, it is. He calmed me down, but I was like really amped up. And then once they called my name, I was fine. And once I started to walk out there, it completely went away.
Yeah, that's what I tell people all the time. It's just that anticipation. Once you go out there and you...
But I've never been in front of that many people. Because Kip comes over and he's like, oh, when you go out there, it's going to be like over 4,000 people. And I'm like, why did you tell me that?
No. I know. We like to put it in our head, no one's watching. No one's watching.
It's funny, though. You couldn't see them. Because once you got into the cage, all the lights you can only see like a few rows, and you couldn't see anybody beyond that. So. But it was great. And my opponent was Eric Connolly, Makahara BJJ. He was awesome. I've met him once or twice before. But great guy. You know, nothing but respect for him for getting in there. Because he was the same way. He talked to me backstage afterwards, and he's like, the day before, he's like, I can't do this. I'm not doing this, you know. But I think as a coach, if I'm gonna go out there and help coach the people that are competing from my school, I should at least have that feeling. I should know what that's like, and I haven't done it in so long. You know, I feel like that's, to me, I think that's important. And I also, you know, some of my students really kind of motivated me to get back out there because I've been watching, you know, I got a bunch of newer guys the last probably 3-4 years that really wanted to compete again. And watching them compete, coaching them at the competitions, coming to your competition here, it really motivated me. That's when I realized, like, I got to get back out there, you know. And that's what drove me to do it again. And I needed something on the calendar. Like, my whole career as a cop, I always had, like, SWAT calls and all these things that I was training for that was like, I need to be ready for at any moment. So I had a goal in mind. But once that ended, I went from 1,000 miles an hour to 10, and now I'm just like, what do I do with myself? You know, I felt like I was like almost slowly dying. Like, you know, I'm training, but what is it for? You know, I love it, but at the same time, I need something. So the competition puts a mark on the calendar, and it makes me accountable.
I agree 100%. I just went through a similar process myself. I had messaged you the other day saying you were one of the people that motivated me to get off the couch and get it back out there and do it again. I mean, I took 3 years off. It's not 10 years, but for me, 3 years felt like an eternity. And it was, you know, a lot of the same reasons, excuses, whatever. I tried to justify it internally to myself. I called them reasons, but I mean, they were really excuses. And it was the same thing. You put that date on the calendar. It's like, oh shit. Like, I need to be accountable every single day, even if it's just for my own mental stake. I need to do it. Like having the ice cream cone on one Saturday is not going to kill my whole training camp, but it's going to mess up my head.
And it's funny though, like I've gotten a lot of messages. I didn't expect that. I've gotten a lot of messages from people like yourself, the same kind of thing. And And that's kind of, that's how it happened for me though. Like, Will Kerr is a friend of mine. I don't know if you know Will. Will fought in WEC and stuff. He's an officer in Connecticut. He was a really good MMA fighter back in the day. And, he had done the reality fighting grappling back in January, and I went to watch him, and I was like, I got to do that. So that, and I talked to him, and he helped me train for it and stuff. And kind of the same thing, I think we all are put in a place to do something, and that spreads. A friend of mine told us once at our tactical team, he said, don't ever underestimate your effect on the battlefield based on your proximity to it. So what he meant was, you may show me something, maybe at the end of this podcast, you show me something. And then I go back and I show one of my students. And then that student flies to California and shows their cousin, who goes off and gets assaulted somewhere and uses it, and it saves their life. Or they go to a tournament and win. You had an effect on them and never met them. You had an effect on that battle. So it's kind of interesting when you think of it that way. Like it's all connected.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was when we sat down with your old coach, John Connors, and he had done a similar layoff. He was like 10 years out of competition too.
Blue belt to black belt. Yeah.
Wow.
So like that got the wheels turning in my head, and then sat on it for a while, and then saw you preparing and getting out there, and seemed several other people too. I think for some reason this was the last couple of years, probably because of the pandemic, everyone being
I think that probably
forced to the side. You're like more motivated to take those opportunities, knowing that they could be taken away that easy, like they were.
Yeah, absolutely. Scary.
Yeah. You want to ask him the questions?
Yeah, well, right in line with your nerves for your reality walkout, one thing we like to ask everybody is what their either theoretical or actually used walkout songs are.
Oh, so I used for this, obviously I'm an 80s kid, so I used, for those about to rock, AC/DC, the live version.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And to me, like, I don't know, I guess I'm from that era too, but if you think of all the rock bands that ever existed, like, as far as I'm concerned, AC/DC is like, they don't have a ballad. Search for one. They have no ballads. Like, everything's just like in your face, raw, and it gets you kind of excited. So I've always loved that song. I like the live version especially. I like live music. And I just think that hearing the fans scream in the background and stuff like that, it gets me kind of going. And my kids, my youngest, I have 3, but my youngest is 13, and he loves all that music. We just took him to see AC/DC. I'm not AC/DC, Sammy Hagar, up in Mansfield, Mass. a few nights ago. And I asked him, what do you want me to use for a song? And he said, For Those About to Rock.
That's awesome.
So he said, and there was a shirt one of my guys wears too. For those about to fight, we salute you.
That's awesome.
I was thinking of having that made up for next time.
I love that.
Yeah.
We have a Spotify playlist that we have put all of our guests' walkout music on. A couple with trepidation, right? A couple that we're like, oh, we can't put that on there, but we do. So we'll post that for you so you can see what it's like. Yeah. The other thing that we like to ask, typically, when we are asked about, like, what is this thing you guys do? What's this jujitsu? Like, what is that? Like, Pat and I have often said that we kind of like shirk away from that conversation, but you have a very different background. So when people ask you what you do now, what do you tell them?
Just like random people?
Yeah, if you're, whatever, you're at a barbecue and somebody walks up.
Someone
like,
says
hey,
Bushido Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, what do they say?
I tell them, I said, well, I own a martial arts academy. I retired as a police officer, and throughout my career, I'd always trained, and I trained as a kid, and it was kind of like my grandparents always told me, and my dad, if you want to be happy, I'm sure you've heard this before, if you want to be happy in what you do, just pick something you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. So I figured, I might as well do what I love the most, and I love to do jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu is a grappling-based art, and I get into the whole thing about, what it kind of is and the history of it and where it came from. And I'll go on forever. They have to shut me up. But I just kind of educate them about it, because a lot of people have no idea.
Yeah.
Like, we know what it is because we do it. But I'm sure you get it. I get parents that'll call or, want to bring their kids in, and they'll get there and they think, well, where's they're not going to punch and kick, and they're not doing forms, and they're not doing. I'm like, no, this is totally different. You have to really sit them down and explain, like, there's different kinds of martial arts. They focus on different things. And, this is a more grappling based art. And I just explain it what it is, but I also tell them that, it's a lifestyle for those that stick with it. It's a lot more than, like, I'll never, and it's no offense to anyone that does, but my coach, Pedro Sauer, will never call his place a gym. He doesn't do that. And he and I remember I was probably a purple belt. And I'm like, well, why does it matter? He's like, I call it an academy. And he's like, a gym is a place where you go and work out and lift weights and practice a sport maybe. An academy is a place for higher learning. So kind of always stuck with me. So that's why mine says academy.
I feel like we should end the podcast on that. I love that.
That's a great point.
Yep.
So you want to, before we wrap it up, plug your academy programs?
Yeah, sure. Our website's www.bushidobjj.com. We got 2 locations, one in Manchester and one in Hebron, Connecticut. And officersurvivalseries.com. That's our law enforcement website. And then I have a podcast, the Code Podcast. And it's more for fun, just we do it a few times a year with some different people. And anybody's always welcome. We have an open door policy. You want to come down and train, we'd love to have you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Conversation.
Thanks for rolling.
Thank you.